Joint all domain operations, joint all domain command and control. What are they? I brought in Scott to talk about it. He's from the Air Force LeMay Center writing on this.
It is a busy time to be a part of this whole thing. I'm really excited to be talking to you today. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Just right out the gate, like, what is JADO JADC2? Why do we care? Just broad brushstrokes.
Sure. So, a lot of people will say, well, all domain, that sounds like something we already do, right? We're already in all the domains. From a joint doctrine perspective, the domains are air, land, space, sea, maritime, and cyberspace. We already do all those things. So why are we talking about this joint all domain thing? And it's a little more nuanced than that, right? Because, it used to be that everybody kind of lined up together and everybody kind of advanced in their own domain. And that was good enough. It was good enough for everybody to kind of do their own thing in their own domain, and we'd be able to have this superiority across all the domains independently. And that was okay. The problem is that the domains are becoming increasingly interconnected and increasingly interwoven and interdependent. And so those interdependencies, those interconnections, present both opportunities and risks. A case in point would be, GPS. A lot of things require GPS. So to take away that space thing from our air or land, forces would be a big deal. And so, all of these are the types of interconnections that we're talking about. And it's becoming increasingly apparent that those asymmetric approaches from one domain into another are going to be the keys to being able to be successful in the next conflict. And so what joint all domain operations is about is not just about using all the domains jointly. It is about leveraging those interconnections, using one domain to attack into or to defend from a different domain in order to ensure that we have robustness in our approach and strong defense against enemy advance from one domain into another.
So valid, man. But you could have said the same thing, a decade, 2 decades, 1991 style war. So who's driving this, or what's driving this? Why now, essentially?
Sure. So I'll actually differ with you a little bit there. The amount, you look at an airplane in 1991. Okay, so just to cage everybody, right? 2009, around about 6 was the first iPhone. Okay, so this is pre-iPhone 1. An airplane was essentially an air thing. Sure, it had bits and bytes going on board, but not many. And most of it was proprietary, closed systems, etc. These days, airplanes they rely on space, they rely on cyberspace, they rely more heavily than ever on land because of all the infrastructure that's required. And the exquisite systems that we have in our US military are increasingly dependent across all the domains. And so while you could have made that assertion in 1991, it is becoming more and more true by the day. Previous Secretary of Defense Bob Work said something in 2016, and his assertion was that this idea of multi-domain was going to become the third offset. And so, it's an important piece of this puzzle. The reality is that we've always done some form of combined arms, whether it was the Peloponnesian War with sea and land, or, moving forward, we got the airplane, and then eventually we got space. The level of interconnectedness is increasing. That's what's really changed here. So to go back to your question for, where's this coming from? Following that 2016 idea and the discussion there about multi-domain operations and multi-domain, you started to hear this idea of multi-domain coming around in the services. And it wasn't until the last few years that you really got kind of a barrage of these multi-domain and now joint all-domain discussions. But this is really the maturation of an idea that has been percolating up from the bottom across all the services. The Navy, the Marine Corps, the Army, and the Air Force, and now the Space Force all have their own ideas about what this looks like. But the exciting part is that it's all coming together into a convergence. And for the most part, we're all on roughly the same page, which is exciting because very often, we kind of end up doing these things in our own silos. with everybody having different ideas, and it never kind of comes to a coherent whole. So that's the difference this time around.
Yeah, I like it. And the stovepipes of excellence have always been a challenge of, air-land battle, air-land-sea battle, Marines doing their own thing. It's good to see that joint warfighting concept, being brought into the modern era essentially, but it still seems like we're still bringing forth these different fights in the domains, um, in those domains separately, but trying to synergize them and make them efficiently working with each other, like a system of systems potentially. So do you see that as one fight across all the domains, or are they individual systems and fights and dilemmas across the individual domains? How do you see that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, and a kind of a hard problem. The issue right now is that the way we're structured, it's essentially organized around a domain. And so unless our organization changes dramatically, where we no longer have, for example, component commanders, and it becomes kind of this sub-organized into these joint task forces that echelon all the way down, at some point we break out by domains. You have your army that has your land forces for the most part. You have your navy who has your maritime forces for the most part, et cetera, et cetera. So until we really, really look at reorganizing ourselves, you're going to have some breakdown. You're going to have some partitioning by domain, and that might not necessarily be a bad thing. The difference is that what we're talking about is information sharing, and we're talking about the integrated planning between the domains in order to facilitate tighter synchronization and the realization of opportunities, what we call opportunistic convergence, where we identify something happening on the battlefield and we're able to take advantage of that in the moment in time without these really long arcs, going all the way up to a very high level of command and control, and then all the way down to the tactical actor. No, we can in fact do that tactical integration at the edge between domains in an operationally relevant time frame.
I like it, and I like to think about it. I don't know if it's in JADC2 is that sense, decide, act, or sense, decide, act, and then making those OODA loops as small as we can at the tactical, and then obviously at the operational strategic, applying those asymmetrically potentially against our adversary, creating those dilemmas where we think it would provide the most, call it bang for the buck, most wicked challenge for them, potentially enable some maneuver for us. Is that how you guys think about it as well, or am I off on a little bit of that concept?
No, I think that's right. You kind of went to the Boydian OODA loop, if you will. Kind of that observe, orient, decide, act, or as you kind of characterized it. I think that a lot of people are thinking in that way. That's a kind of a leading idea. But the other piece of this too is, sometimes it isn't always about being faster; it's about being better. And so it's increasing the quality of our decisions, not just the speed of our decisions. And so with that in mind, part of this is, augmenting human intelligence, augmenting, the ability to synthesize massive amounts of information on time scales that are relevant to the operation. And sometimes it's about slowing down your decision making in order to wait for just the right moment to decide and to execute. And so, we, in the tactical sense, a faster OODA is usually the way to go. In the grander scheme of things, it's having an appreciation for that temporal domain, that temporal, how do we use time to our advantage to pace ourselves in a way to seize the moment, if you will.
No, I like it. And Arnold, I think it was said the World War I was won by brawn, World War II was won by logistics, and I believe if we ever get to World War III, it'll be won by the ability to control that fight in time. Just to that point is, yes, making quick decisions, but making smart decisions, and if we can't make the smart decisions, at least make them quicker so you can fail fast and correct yourself and provide a little bit of decision space, I guess, to react there. And we talked about a little bit in the systems and the domains acting kind of like their own systems and domains instead of making one, universal stovepipe of a joint force that is put forth by one commander. Is that, you know, are we destined to that future in that command structure and presentation of forces and utilization of forces?
Are we going to get to the place where we're in one monolithic whole and we have, kind of this one thing that is driving the whole fight? As somebody who considers himself, something of a technologist or a futurist, I would love to say that we're going to arrive there someday. The flip side is, not having any stovepipes creates these wicked challenges because of scope, span of control, and all of the things that are required to create synergies, across something as huge as a major combat operation. And so I don't know that we will ever, have this one kind of hive mind where everybody's going to be kind of in this giant, sandbox of awesome, and it's going to, arrive us at this place in the future in an optimal way. So you're going to have to partition. And this is going to be one of the biggest challenges in my mind in this JADC2 arena is how do you partition? If you choose not to partition a theater by domain, then how do you partition your force to optimize so that the new seams that you create are better than the old seams that you just got rid of? And so right now we've drawn our seams kind of in the logical way, which is right along these domain boundaries. But what we're finding is that the fluidity across the domain boundary is a vulnerability. And so now if we start to build the force out in a flatter package where you have representation across the domains, well, then now where do we partition? Do we partition more micro geographically? Do we partition functionally? Is it by mission or by proximity of the forces to one another? There's all these different ways to kind of slice the force up so that you have span of command, span of control that's appropriate. But that's going to be a really big problem for our future commanders that I don't know that we have solved yet.
Yeah, it is a wicked problem. And I think it was General Goldfein who says, we need to try to create, multiple dilemmas across the domains for our adversary at an overwhelming speed. So I think that'll probably stick around in the origins of JADC2 and JADO and moving into the joint world. But are you guys still thinking about that when you're conceptually thinking about doctrine and strategy in JADC2 and JADO, or are we no longer trying to create those multiple dilemmas that we're actually trying to go after, goals and Achilles heels of the enemy and things?
I don't know that those necessarily are independent ideas or mutually exclusive ideas. I think that creation of dilemmas is a dilemma is in the mind of the enemy, and so the way that we create dilemmas is by creating uncertainty, by creating alternate pathways, so that the enemy doesn't feel like, hey, I'm defended, in a particular way. If they feel as though there are many different avenues of attack or of approach, we don't have to leverage all those things. We just have to have that be, in their mind as a possibility, and boom, we have, kind of realize this idea of multiple dilemmas. And so, actually attacking, centers of gravity or, as you said, Achilles heel, the critical infrastructure or whatever it might be, that may be a means to an end. But the informational piece of this, which is again in the mind of the enemy, is equally important, which is they are uncertain from where the attack is going to come. And by the time the attack comes, or multiple attacks from multiple directions, they may or may not be able to defend anymore.
Yeah, I like that as well. And moreover, like, these dilemmas might not be attacks. They could be some sort of subversion or sabotage, or, screwing with the enemy's or adversary's decision space or trust in their troops or their systems or their communications and things. So I think that's a good answer. Anything else? You were still talking when I interrupted, or?
No, I think that's a great point. Some of our adversaries are quite keen on deception. And I think that General Brown had said that we need to bring deception back into our kind of our everyday thought process with respect to warfare. It's a key part of it, and if we aren't leveraging deception in some sense, then we're probably not winning.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because a lot of that deception that you're bringing up is now happening in the cyber world, the EMS, if you will. So it's a little bit easier for actors like China and Russia to be able to twist or distort the truth to their ends, where we've taken, from a liberal democracy standpoint of, the moral high ground, using that as a potential strength of ours, but then also kind of eliminating some of the maneuver space in that, asymmetric gray zone, Asimov style.
I think if we limit ourselves to kind of the hardware, the physical domains, kind of discussion, we're really cutting ourselves off at the knees. There are some really good ideas out there about leveraging information, leveraging the EMS and cyberspace. These are critical ideas that really need to mature quickly in order for us to maintain the high ground in those spaces. And frankly, we're seeing the impacts of information in our day-to-day lives now. We're seeing the impacts of misinformation and distrust of systems and the media and these kinds of things. These are being kind of imposed by various actors, and that is something that we need to be aware of. And we also, as a military, we need to be aware of how to do that too. This is a new space that we haven't necessarily been well practiced in, and if we fail to leverage this new space, then we may not even get to the tanks and planes part.
So how do we do this? Like, what's being worked on? Strategy, doctrine, guidance, direction. Fiscally, on paper. Commander to commander. Where are we at there? Because I don't think it's really trickled down to the shooter, to the sensor, to those actually expending resources. What's going on, and how long is this going to take to actually get some guidance and direction?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't know that anybody has a real strong handle on this yet. I would love to say that it's going to be next year, but we all know that's not the case. It's going to take time for us to really kind of pivot ourselves to a place where we need to be in order to get after a lot of the things that we just talked about. There are various strategies that are coming about. The Joint Staff J6 just recently released something in Breaking Defense that said that JADC2 is a strategy. It's not a piece of technology, and so these types of things, they're maturing very quickly. But I think people get kind of wrapped around the axle, or maybe a little bit confused by a lot of the terms. Some people will say, well, ABMS is JADC2. Well, ABMS is a system of systems. It's a technology. It's something that's under development, but it is not by itself JADC2. That ideas, groups, and tools idea is that all three of those things often need to change in order to make meaningful change in a system. So your organization, the way you organize yourself, the tools by which, the technologies and tools by which you're executing, and then finally the ideas. How do we go about doing this? All three of those things need to change together. So that's gonna take some time. There's acquisitions that have to happen. There's organizing. The full kind of .mil-PF stack has to change together in order to arrive at a suitable solution for JADC2 in the future. And this is the trick: we can't just stop one day and start something new the next. The entire time that we're making this transition, we have to have a viable fighting force that can fight tonight. And so this is a really critical piece of this, because we can't just stop what we're doing now for some pipe dream 10 years down the road. We have to chart a roadmap that keeps us viable the entire time in order to arrive at this future vision. And this is the trick that I don't know that we have knocked quite yet.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to have to take a little bit of risk, because you are going to be changing things and divesting to invest. So how do you take that strategic risk in places where it's minimize chance of exposure, etc. That's good. All right. Before we move into the actual application, anything else that you have on strategy, the overview, ideas part of JADC2 and JADO?
Yeah, so Matt, the one thing I will say is that none of the ideas that I've expressed represent or constitute the official position of the United States Air Force, nor the LeMay Center where I work, or Air Education and Training Command.
Yep, nor US SOCOM either.
Did you like that interview with Scott? I did. I think I learned a lot. Stay tuned for part number 2, linked up ahead. If you like this, there's more content coming down on artificial intelligence, all domain command and control, joint all domain operations, and blockchain. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, stay tuned. This is Jerry. See ya.